2026 regular meeting be held electronically via Zoom, live broadcast on the District of Tofino channel, that the facility provided for the public to watch and hear the meeting be located at Tla-o-qui-aht Sound Theatre, 380 Campbell Street, C. No objection, the motion is carried. I do have a motion to amend the agenda to include correspondence. Our MP Gord Johns. So I'll read from the chair that the June 16, 2026 regular council agenda be amended to include correspondence from Mr. Gord Johns, MP reporting over and regarding BC Ferries funding at item 9.3, and that the agenda be adopted as amended. Second by Councillor Stearney for the comment. Carried. Or sorry. All in favor. I missed that part. The consent agenda, I do have just a little clerical correction down on items 4.3, the second to last recommendation. The housekeeping clerical omission that the beginning of that recommendation is that the committee of the whole recommends to council that staff be authorized to draft amendments to public properties regulation bylaw to be restricting construction hours. The note that does not require through actually I'm going to move from the chair that items 4.1 to 4.3 of the consent agenda on the regular council meeting held June 16, 2026 be approved and received. Second. Thomas, any further comments? All in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. Mayor's report. I was able to go to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities in Edmonton this year. It was an excellent opportunity. The themes were infrastructure, housing, and AI was also a prominent topic for many of the seminars. Excellent information. I was able to be there for Minister Gregor Robertson's announcement of the new Build Canada Homes consolidated funding under one ministry. Sounds pretty exciting, and I was able to follow it up by meeting with senior Build Canada Homes staff, and that turned into a prepping and getting meetings together with the corporation. So that's moving on very quickly. We're very pleased to see the government is willing to work with us so quickly with the housing corporation. I was very, very pleased to be able to thank Minister Dominic LeBlanc personally for his efforts and his support for our wastewater treatment plant. And I was also very pleased to know that Mr. LeBlanc continues to be aware and supportive of our current infrastructure needs in Tofino. So, fortuitous. I was also able to meet with hundreds of mayors and other elected officials from across the country and share some of our challenges, which are very, very similar. Municipalities struggling with infrastructure, water, sewer, the cost of roads, it's all going up. But we were also to share some wins, and it was just a great opportunity to see how the communities are doing and how they're meeting the challenges that we have as well. And I invited them all to Tofino, and I think they're all coming, so that's great. It's about 3,000 people. We were able to host Chief Wilford Coots, elected from Tla-o-qui-aht. They came out to share some of their opinions on water in the region, wealth of the planet. And I was just so pleased to be part of a region of communities that are so supportive of each other. Port Alberni, Chuckasit, Blue-Lit, Tla-o-qui-aht, all the way up to Ashquit. It's just, it's great to be on the West Coast. Know that we're all West Coast communities for each other. That's my mayor's report. Public comment on agenda items. Ms. Larson.
Thank you, Mayor Law. We do currently have one member of the public who has signed up to make a comment via Zoom. So that's Mr. John Brissett. So Mr. Brissett, before I unmute you and you have an opportunity to speak, I'm just going to do a call for anyone else that's in attendance that would like to sign up for public comment. If you are in attendance online via Zoom, you can do so now using the Q&A function. Before you comment, you'll need to add your name, the agenda item you'd like to speak to, and your residential address. So I will now do a call. Calling once, calling twice, calling 3 times. So just the one comment from Mr. John Brissett. I'm going to unmute you and you'll have access to your audio or your mic for up to 2 minutes.
Mr. Brissett, did you get all that?
I just want to check that works. Everyone can hear me?
Perfect, we can hear you. You've got 2 minutes.
Great. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is John Brissett, and I'm speaking on behalf of Woodsmere Holdings Corp. regarding item 10.4 on tonight's agenda, which is our zoning amendment application for the proposed project at 825 Campbell Street in Tofino. We appreciate the opportunity to bring this application forward and look forward to working constructively with district staff as the review process continues. Our goal is to deliver a thoughtful project that responds to local housing needs, respects Tofino's unique character, and contributes positively to the community. We recognize that zoning amendment applications require careful technical review, including consideration of infrastructure, neighborhood fit, environmental context, and long-term community objectives. We respect the role that staff play in that process and are committed to working collaboratively, transparently, and in good faith to address any issues as they arise. Housing delivery in coastal communities like Tofino is challenging, and a successful project requires partnership between local government and development community. We believe this application represents an opportunity to add much needed housing while supporting the broader goals of the district. And we look forward to continuing the conversation and appreciate your consideration of item 10.4. Thank you for your time and best this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Brissett. No other comment? Move on to delegations. We have a delegation from Mr. Bob Hanson. And Mr. Reed, can you hear me? We're just working through some video setup here.
Yeah, can you hear me and see me?
But we can now.
Yeah, Bob is still in the waiting room, I believe. I think he needs to be permitted in. And he just texted me, so hopefully we can get him in. He had 6 minutes of a delegation spiel, and then I had the last 4.
Sure. Well, we'll just take our time and make sure that.
Yeah.
We don't have a waiting room enabled for the Zoom, so he should just be able to enter automatically when he clicks through the registration link.
Okay.
Maybe we'll just give you a couple seconds to reach out to Bob and make sure he's making his way into the Zoom room.
Thank you for your patience.
No worries.
He did send me his, oh, what's he got here? He did send me his notes if need be.
Maybe you could just reach out to him and see if he can re-enter.
Yeah, I sent him an email with the updated link.
I think he may be trying to join, so I'll just give it 1 minute here. I see someone entering the second, Chris Reed, who I'm thinking is probably Bob.
Unless there's two of you.
There is not two of me. There he is.
Perfect.
Okay. I had to send him my link, so that's why he has my name.
We know who he is.
If we could get him unmuted, please. Bob, you're still muted.
How's that?
There you go.
Okay.
Excellent.
All right. So I should begin then.
Sure, take it away. You guys got it.
Okay. So action plan update year 2, compliance, enforcement emphasis, and other actions. Thank you, Your Worship and Council, for the opportunity to present today. My name is Bob Hansen, WildSafe BC project lead on the action plan to enhance the bear resistance of the waste management system. I'm here with Chris Reed, the WildSafe BC Pacific Rim Community Coordinator. I'd like to provide some context for our delegation. Recent bin tag surveys show an increase in residents putting carts out the night before. Damaged cart surveys have revealed that many residents have damaged carts that can no longer be secured against bears. Many, if not most residents, have not secured their carts against bears accessing them or dragging them away. It has also been observed that many businesses with lift bar, commercial garbage bins, and commercial grease bins persist in leaving their bins unsecured, making them easily accessible to bears. These situations, contrary to the Tofino Wildlife Attractant Management Bylaw and the BC Wildlife Act, create the conditions for a return to the cycle of human-bear conflicts and bear destructions. WildSafe BC Pacific Rim, the ACRD, district staff, and other community partners have been engaged in continuous education and outreach around bear-resistant cart management for the past 3 years. Similar efforts around preventing human-bear conflicts involving commercial bins has been ongoing since 2018. The Year 2 strategy of the action plan identifies the need to create awareness that following best practices for managing residential carts and commercial waste bins is mandatory rather than optional. The most common reason heard from residents and businesses for not following required best practices is that we've never had a problem with bears. The reality is that by waiting for something to happen, the cycle of human-bear conflict is perpetuated. A bear that gets a food reward is very likely on a one-way road to food conditioning, conflict, and an untimely end. The only way to break the cycle is not through reacting to conflict, but rather through prevention of conflict. The acknowledged Bear Smart community goal is to be in a place where following best practices for human-bear conflict prevention is the community norm, routine. We've submitted several documents for your consideration and information. One, a progress report on the activities of the action plan. Two, a specific request and proposal for the amendment to the Tofino Wildlife Attractant Management Bylaw to specify the requirements for securing commercial lift bar garbage bins and commercial grease bins, and a draft commercial lift bar bin decal to raise business awareness of the legal requirements. We'd like to express our commitment to support in any way we can the increased efforts of Tofino bylaw services for compliance and enforcement around the prohibition of putting carts out the night before pickup, the requirement to seek repairs to damaged carts as soon as possible, the anchoring of carts to prevent being knocked over and dragged away, the best practices for securing commercial garbage and grease bins, and other provisions of the Wildlife Attractant Management Bylaw. Looking beyond 2026, we'd also like to request that Mayor and Council consider participating along with the District of Tofino and other regional partners in funding a BC Conservation Officer Service Wildlife Safety Response Officer residing on the West Coast. Lastly, conflict prevention outreach and training continues to be delivered by WildSafe BC Pacific Rim. And I'm going to pass on to Chris now to describe a new initiative in this regard.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Mayor and Council. Yeah, as you all know, we do all of the same old WildSafe BC public education and outreach. So that's all ongoing with businesses, with residents, with visitors. A new initiative is the Neighborhood Champion Program. So we have residents in our communities who are continuing to promote the conversation between, governments and the community about wildlife and how to keep them safe and how to keep ourselves safe. So these passionate folks that are in the communities, they have an understanding and they've seen the negative impacts that humans have had on wildlife, and they are driven to help our community. So this Neighborhood Champion Program helps those individuals feel more equipped to help and offer solutions to their neighbors. I know if I was in the position of just being a neighbor, I don't know how confident I would feel in just trying to spread WildSafe BC's messaging if I didn't know them personally or didn't have good communications. So this is me opening up and telling people what we're trying to get out there and giving them the permission to do so and some of the resources. So I'm offering champions resources such as an at-home checklist, super simple list of attractants for people at home to go through in their yard, access to our resources that we give out, so stainless steel carabiners and anchoring methods, and obviously our educational material. We'll also be familiarizing these champions with the bylaws that are in place and may be enforced. Hopefully this helps with getting neighborhoods in check and hopefully getting attractants down to a minimum. The final step of the champion program could be me assessing homeowners that are willing for me to come onto their property and just assess their yard. It wouldn't take any longer than 10 minutes. I do these assessments for businesses and for campgrounds. So if that was willing and optional for certain streets, then it'd be really nice to have certain sections of the community and the neighborhood, known secure regions of the neighborhood. As of right now, the incentive is just recognition by WildSafe, myself, and I'm hoping the district council can also recognize these champions as important people within their community helping to preserve our wildlife. Bob kind of hit the nail on the head with what's asked of you guys, but I'll just reiterate that we thank you, council, for having, ears and listening to the community and asking all the right questions. That's very important. And we have had a human wildlife assessment of Tofino, outlines major wildlife corridors and just promoting the protection of natural spaces, even within very close proximity to urban areas. They help save wildlife lives. Helping, number 2, to help enforce wildlife attractant bylaws. So just making sure that these amendments are being passed. It's crucial for enforcement to have action, to take action in the communities. And then just reiterating that there's public awareness and education along with these, and that there's lots of people hoping to help. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Thanks. It's a badge of honor not to have 0 bears destroyed over the last couple of years in the municipality itself. It's sad to see that maybe non-compliance with securing and latching bins, residential and commercial, could put that at risk. So thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. I'm going to open it up to council for questions and comments. Councillor Steer.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you, Chris. Nice to meet you, and Bob once again. Just a couple of comments. Certainly, Chris, in your last presentation here, or the last bit around promoting community champions, and maybe there's a way we can, the district can help in formalizing that a bit more. You had some great ideas around that. And then, Bob, this was in regards to, I think there was one of the potential amendments to the bylaw, and very much supportive of that, and certainly working with staff to be able to make that official. And then the one you had mentioned, I know Q&amp had brought forward a funding request very late in the budget season around the addition of a CO officer. And I'm just wondering, Bob, as maybe the more appropriate area as a regional initiative is to be looking, I certainly think there would be support on council, but certainly through the ACRD, and it may be that it has the creation of a service, or maybe a much more regional approach, and then we can encompass all those communities on the West Coast through the ACRD. It may be the best place to put that rather than the individual municipalities. So it certainly might be, this presentation might be great at ACRD as well, to be able to bring that forward and to be able to support potentially a regional service for that CO position.
Yes, thank you. We will be putting forward a request to give a delegation to the West Coast Committee.
Right. Perfect. Thanks, Bob.
Comments from councillors? I do have a potential motion if council would like to support the request from WildSafe BC to have the report and the proposed WAMB amendments referred to staff for review and council. Yeah, council, yes, thumbs up. Okay. Then we'll move from the chair. The WildSafe BC report and proposed wildlife attractant and management bylaw amendments be referred to staff for review and report back to council. Second by Councillor Steer. Further comments? All in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. And I just want a question from staff, clarification. It discuss, I believe, referring CEO position funding to 2027 financial planning process. Did we do that?
Thank you, Mayor Law. I don't know if council made a formal motion, but that was on staff's radar to consider it in the 2027 financial plan process. So as part of referring these requests to staff, will likely in our report indicate that.
Super. Great. We'll leave it that is. And just a question for the champion program. I'm not sure what council can do for that besides expressing our support at this time, but I can look to council for.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking, I was listening, and there was a few pieces of that puzzle, and maybe it might be some consultation with Chris in terms of what he, or maybe we've got him right there, maybe to ask what he thought possibly the district support could be in that community champion. I think you mentioned about some type of formal recognition, which would require you probably bringing those names to us in the support that you'd be looking for. Is that something that that would be what you're thinking of?
Yes, as of right now, that's where I've gotten. That's what I think would be very valuable.
Yeah, and maybe if I may through the chair. Yeah, and when that time comes, maybe when a little formalized more, you can maybe bring that back to council, either in a committee of the whole, to see what that might look like in terms of a way that we could recognize formally. It may be that we need to consult with staff as to the best way forward to do some form of formal recognition.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Steer.
Super. Thank you, you two. Great. Glad
Thank
you're on.
you.
Okay, we're going to move on to correspondence. We've got correspondence from Mr. Bissot regarding visitor impact fee. I do have some comments on this, but maybe I'll move my comments first. Open up to council for comments or discussion after. I do want to first of all note that Tofino, like many resort communities, all the resort communities in BC, are dealing with pressures on services and infrastructure, pressures on taxation, and we have, responded over the past few years with some pretty incredible strides forward in non-property tax funding. We've got $400,000 from the RDT. It goes to our wastewater treatment plant. It covers a large portion of that debt. We have pay parking, which is visitor funded, which goes to reserves, goes to ball field and many other projects. Those total over $1 million non-property tax funding. That is an incredible win, but we do recognize that more needs to be done, and we're certainly putting pressure on the provincial government. And in that regard, we are part of the resort community collaborative. I sit on that. Satiana also sits on that, and the province has established a Resort Municipality Initiative (RMI) advisory committee as well, to bring together RMI communities and key government ministries, tourism, arts, culture, sport, finance, and housing, and municipal affairs, to really examine cost pressures faced by tourism-dependent communities. We know that a town of 2,500 people cannot support, with property taxation alone, the infrastructure required to handle tens of thousands of people. And neither can any community that has that kind of influx of visitation, an economy that depends on such a large increase in population. These communities, we support a high volume of tourists relative to our resident population. I believe Tofino is about 300 to 400, somewhere around. And so this committee will collaboratively explore options and possible mechanisms to support sustainable tourism, regenerative tourism, municipal resilience, and community well-being, with representation from resort communities like Tofino, Whistler, Valemount. This initiative marks a coordinated effort to identify innovative policy solutions for BC's tourism municipalities. And we know the British Columbia government has recently released Look West, and we know that their goal is to increase tourism significantly. And in order to do that, they will have to address disparity in infrastructure and services costs for residents. It's also in our strategic plan. One of our priorities is to develop effective relationships to have a strong seat at the table with provincial and federal governments so that we are better positioned to advocate for our critical priorities. This includes advocating for funding to support our community's critical needs. And again, I was just in Edmonton and was able to meet directly with federal counterparts. And so we're working very hard on this front. This is not lost on any of us, staff, council, everybody in the community knows this is a priority, and we're working very hard to address it. So that's my spiel. I'm going to open it up to council for comments in response to it. So, Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, just my only comment to add to that, and that would form, I think, a good response for Mr. Dussault should we want to write a letter. Whatever fees or implementation of these types of charges, which have been proposed and even contemplated by the Ministry of Finance to some extent at the staff level. Of course, it takes support from the province because municipalities operate under the provincial legislation. What our powers are. So anything that the province would allow, I mean, municipalities has to work throughout the province. So while Tofino often has proposed different sources of funding, until several municipalities get together and support something, the province is a bit at odds with what exactly to implement. So thank Mr. Dussault for his letter, and it's not the first time this has been proposed, and I think it would be a great help to municipalities that face the pressures of large visitation. So yeah, that's my only comment. It's the difficulty for the provincial end is finding something that fits throughout the province.
Super. Councillor McMaster.
Yeah, I think this argument has been going on for even before I got on council 15 years ago. And it's not just resort municipalities. Municipalities want to have more control over the funds we raise. That's the way where it goes. And whether it's MRDT or visitor fees, they'd like to have a say. And and I don't see that changing. I think the BC government is trying to raise every penny it can get. Not about to free things up when they're trying to raise money themselves.
Okay, well, I think a letter back to Mr. Dussault is warranted. I think it'd be good to get this out there. Perhaps we've got two options. We can have corporate officer respond, all that information, or we can have council respond. What would council like? What do you think? Suggestions, Councillor Anderson.
Well, it's addressed to council, so I prefer the council response. Perhaps a motion to authorize the mayor to respond to Mr. Dussault's letter based on council discussion.
Okay. Second. Any further comment? All in favor? None opposed. Motion's carried. Ms. Larson, did you get that? Okay, thank you. Okay, item 9.2, mistake regarding draft recreation and parks master plan survey feedback. It's up to council for comments. Councilor Steer.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. I'd like to thank the letter writer first and foremost for their engagement in the process. They have a long history of engagement in the recreation of this community. Very much appreciate those comments and feedback. In the context of the draft recreation master plan, there's still I think there were some conversations within the letter addressing some of the strategic actions and specifically around aquatics and the related issues around there that have long been an issue within our community. And there were some comments regarding the draft plan, and I think the engagement process was very wholesome, and I think some of the letter writers' issues were not feeling that they were heard, or that the interpretation of that information didn't represent what the community was saying, and that's important feedback to have. Once again, we are in the final stages of that plan, and I think it would be good to. I would also like to refer this, if possible, this letter to the Recreation Advisory Committee, of which Councillor Sloman chairs it, to provide feedback once again from the advisory committee on this important document that will help guide the recreation and recreation, not just in the we often think of it in that strict sporting type arena, but the much broader sense of recreation. And so want to once again thank the letter writer for the comments there, and to look to maybe having the letter referred to the Recreation Advisory Committee to have further comments from them in terms of the draft plan itself and some of the comments that have been received from the public.
Councillor Thomas.
On that note, I'm just wondering who's getting the feedback survey. It might be unnecessary to refer this to the Recreation Committee if the survey is already going through a channel for feedback.
I'll look to the chair of the committee. I do know that they have been able to review the document, but in terms of the survey results, not 100% sure if that has
maybe
been.
that's a question for staff about where the survey results are going. Because if it's already being captured through this particular channel, I don't know, we need to refer it individually outside of the rest of the survey results.
I see.
Yeah.
Tatiana.
Yeah, so maybe what I'll do for council, just have Mr. Rogers explain what will happen with the feedback. I think the period for feedback on Tla-o-qui-aht closed on June 6th, from my understanding, and what happens from this point forward might be helpful for us to hear.
Yeah, through the chair. So all the feedback we receive will go back into updating this final draft, which is in front of council in the coming month or two. How exactly it'll get worked in will depend on subject matter or what was responded to, and what we can do at this fairly late stage, but we will review it in terms of the overall plan. And again, not necessarily able to address one person or one comment, but we'll take a look at it and see what may be adjusted.
Yeah, and maybe I'll make a comment on aquatics, because it's been close to my heart for many years, decades here in Tofino, and I do acknowledge the sticks points. We don't have a public rule. We are an extreme outlier in the province in that regard. Council has taken some steps to look into that, and we even recently discussed when we were discussing school potential helping out in partnering with the school basketball. Could be an optimal spot for Frank, and that came up in the conversation, I believe. So it's not far from everybody's minds, the cost and the logistics of it are also top of mind. But I think with some creative thinking, and keeping at it, and perhaps noting that it's been ongoing discussion for decades, really not getting much forward momentum, it might be a good idea to broaden our potential players, you know. And I'm just going to say, because I know that Councillor Sloan also has notice motion coming on later on, I'd like to bring up regarding aquatics and training. But you know, when I was in Edmonton, and I've been going to FCM for probably 5 years, and I was able to meet owner Western Recreation. They're a company that builds outdoor aquatic facilities, hundreds of them across Western Canada. And they do routinely come in full 25-meter pool outside with beach entry, water slides, change rooms, bathrooms, everything under 2 million. And I think that you know, it's potentially time for this conversation to go beyond the district of Tofino, us, not the district itself, but council and staff, and maybe there's potential people, you know, potential businesses or community members that start taking an active role outside of this room as well. It's a big need. I'd like to see kids learn how to swim. That's all for me. Anybody else? Councillor Thomas.
I don't want to get too far into the debate about the merits of the pool. I think we all agree that aquatics would be important. We'd be remiss to have this discussion or even touch on the discussion without speaking about our water issues. And the fact that we are telling people, you know, this particular letter writer also went through issues with securing water for an unbuilt house. And this is something that needs to be kept in mind as people continue to bring the subject up. It does need to be balanced with the fact that we are looking at restricting some housing being built. We're restricting the types of businesses that can open. And water is an ongoing issue. So before we get too excited about an expensive pool, we need to keep in mind that we are dealing with very real water restrictions.
Councillor Steve, was there a hand over there? Councillor Anderson, and then Councillor Steve.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that there's actually quite a few different ideas around providing aquatic recreation, including traveling out of town, bringing in pop-up pools and an outdoor pool, an indoor pool, use facility. And I think there's different levels of support and different levels of feasibility with all those ideas. It needs to be assessed in sort of a larger format where we could, I don't know, I think you were inferring that maybe the private sector could become involved. You know, that hasn't been brought into the conversation. So it's not uncommon for groups or individuals to get behind sort of one idea and try to go for that. We all fall in love with something. I use the aquatic center in Nanaimo very often, like weekly, and I really like that facility, but it's way out of reach for our area. I think it's you know, it's a 50-meter pool plus a recreational pool and several other facilities, including water slides and everything. If nobody's seen it already, that would be lovely. But they have a population of 100,000 people to support it. So anyways, there's all different levels, all different ideas, and we somehow have to bring it into a forum where we can evaluate the real needs of the community, how best to deliver that, and maybe over time, maybe start with one program and move to another and phase in a larger facility at some point in the future. A lot of the hopes have been pinned to the multiplex facility with the rink and pool notion, and that still exists as well as an idea, but it's been unattainable for quite a long time too. So anyways, I don't know how we're gonna get there, but I as much as we appreciate the letter writer, I can't say that any of the ideas proposed are something we just grab onto and run with without more assessment and a larger discussion.
That's just true.
And I'll just quickly add, I think, once again, this was one component of an overall recreation master plan, which had a number of actions and strategies and goals. And I know the letter writer had some issues surrounding that. But this is a much broader document that will help us guide our discussions throughout the next decade. It is a living document as well, and one that we should be looking at once we see the final draft to help us in making those decisions that are often centered around budget conversations and assessing what the needs and the priorities within the community that have been identified. So I'll leave it at that, and just I'm looking forward once again to that recreation master plan to help us in making these types of important decisions.
Okay. Move on. We do have 9 point, unless there's another comment. Okay. We do have 9.3 edition, that is for John's letter requesting our support to make a motion to support his motion. So that's what it was. Now, comments from council. Will I reopen my computer? Stake. Yeah. Sure, go ahead. I'm just pulling up. I have Ms. Larson sent me a potential.
Did you want to go first then?
Nope.
Yeah, I would like to support. For John's, I feel like ferry fees impact all of us, and they're creeping up year after year, or maybe not year after year, but over and over again, they seem to increase, and I think it affects almost every aspect of our day-to-day living.
I mean, the fees that MP Johns is suggesting are coming, the increases are astronomical. This letter, and that would impact our community, it would impact our economy, it would impact everybody coming to the island, impact food prices, anything that comes over by ferry. So I think this is an urgent enough situation, an urgent enough request that I'd like to see us support. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to echo Councillor Soman's comments, I think that looking forward, we need to recognize that the cost of travel is going up, and ferries, even though they're very expensive, are still mostly the most affordable option for people to get across, and we need to protect that. And even though highway infrastructure normally falls under provincial regulation, anytime highways pass through federally regulated areas, they fall under federal regulation. And so I think that the federal government can look at our waterways as, you know, that's a little bit of an overlap.
Super.
I just also had a comment. I thought, you know, time and time again, some of the tourism, the report from other tourism hotels and stuff, I've heard that tourists coming to Tofino are finding it more and more expensive to get here, and it's often becoming cheaper to fly elsewhere in the off season, whereas many places on the island need tourists in the off season, and the increased ferry prices are going to be detrimental to affordability to visit our island.
And I think, yeah, and I think just to be clear, John's underlying or overarching concern is the inequity in funding across the province. PEI gets far, far more funding in many respects. This is one of them that's very good. And I think that must be addressed. We're all Canadians. We're the federal government, we all contribute. And this is our highway. It's the only way on and off, realistically. I do have a motion before us. I can move from the chair that council supports Honorable MP Gord John's motion M35 and calls for fair, stable, long-term federal operational support for BC ferries, and that staff be directed to write a letter of support urging the federal government to modernize outdated ferry funding arrangements. Second by Councillor Steer. With comments? All in favor? None opposed, motion carried. Okay, presentations and reports. 10.1, we have a housing improvement bylaw number 1356. 691 Campbell Street. Scriba.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. First presentation is for the housing agreement bylaw number 1356. So this housing agreement is in relation to the subject property at 691 Campbell Street. It's coming forward today for redux of third reading, given some changes that were made to the agreement at the last council meeting. So very brief presentation just to go over the previous clause, the revised clause, just for clarity. So as a summary, this is for that 2 units of affordable housing in redevelopment. So the change that was made was the sentence in bold. So as was brought to staff's attention at last meeting, that the province regulates via the residential tenancy branch for the increases that are permitted annually. And it wasn't clear as to whether they are in alignment with the CPI. And so even evaluating those numbers wasn't clear, and the province was actually a little bit higher. So to maintain alignment with the provincial intent, we decided to pivot from CPI over to the BC residential tenancy branch. So now we're in alignment with the province. So this agreement essentially is just mirroring what's already permitted via the act. So that was the only change that was made to the agreement, but since the bylaw itself is, the agreement is part of the bylaw, we needed to bring it back for a rereading of third consideration. So the recommendation on the table today is that the previous reading be rescinded, and that the housing agreement bylaw is reread for third consideration as amended.
Excellent, thank you. I think we can go on a conversation on this one. Would somebody like to?
Okay, read the. Thank you, through the chair. That third reading of District of Tofino Housing Agreement Bylaw number 1356/2026 granted at the regular council meeting held on May 26, 2026 be rescinded.
Thomas, all in favor? No opposed, carried.
And that the District of Tofino Housing Agreement Bylaw number 1356/2026 be read a third time as amended.
Thomas, all in favor? Carried. Excellent. On to 10.2, official community plan amendment. 0.03. Who else? Oh, of course.
I have a non-pecuniary interest in one of the neighbor.
Go ahead, Mr. Wells.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I'm going to present to you for first reading, amending the OCP to facilitate the development of a new multi-residential building in partnership with the Tofino Housing Corporation at the address of 740 Campbell Street. Here's the subject property just outside of our community's growth payment boundary. The report before you speaks to the associated OCP amendment to change the land use designation for this parcel. Following this amendment, if successful, would come the amending of the zoning bylaw. These processes are intended to run in a staggered concurrent way to expedite the process, while ensuring that the OCP amendment would be adopted first. The site's situated between our district-owned water infrastructure to the north
and private commercial structures to the south. Across Campbell Street, to the west is a steep slope upward that's somewhat forested, and there's also proposed residential development quite large up there as well, known as Woodsmere. Not yet constructed, but expansive in scope. So that development would have some impacts to this downslope property. On site is an access drive that exists to maintain and service the Bay Street pump house just to the north. Much of the site is relatively flat before substantially sloping downward to shoreline. And so the current structure, as well as the proposed structure, sits in a nice perched, unobstructed, with unobstructed views across Browning Passage over to Mears Island. With views over to Mears Island. So to summarize the property in question, 740 Campbell is designated for residential, but low density acreage, just outside of our containment boundary. The site's a little under 1 acre, and we're looking to change its land use designation from peninsula to future homes. A bit of a background here. This amendment was initiated by staff to help advance requirements associated with the Housing Accelerator Fund project. Particularly Initiative 3 of this project outlines a plan for the district to collaborate with Tofino Housing Corp to build non-market multifamily housing projects on district-owned land, as well as to expedite that process. The goal of this initiative really is to leverage district-owned assets to increase the supply of below-market housing targeted at local workforce. The determination of this site arose from a collaborative and strategic review of 5 district land holdings, and this site was chosen as number 1 during the Committee of Full meeting on July 29, 2025. And then subsequently, permission to proceed was granted for this amendment back in March, on the 31st this year. But here's a schematic or a rendering from the schematic design architectural package. Currently, what's being proposed is a 21-unit multi-family development. This would increase the density or beyond what current policy allows for. The development would respect the cliff geometry and maximize views. What's being proposed is a very efficient modular design, stacking the units, having a simple structure. There'd be no underground parking. The development would appear as 2 stories from the street, stepping down to 3 stories towards the rear. So it's modest in visual scale. And then the flat roof associated with the construction process could offer potential for shared residential or shared resident amenity space, perhaps a green roof, all to be determined at future phases. Associated with this project also is a waterfront park. So since this is district-owned land and there's a current slip and unused boathouse, it's well as access, it was deemed as a potential opportunity to develop a public amenity in greater detail. So here's a rendering from the schematic design of the waterfront park package. Public beach access would be retained, the east end of the site. There'd be a designed launch point for non-motorized watercraft, such as kayaks, canoes, stand-up paddleboards. And this would support the district vision for a broader connected water trail network, particularly on the inlet side of our community. This would expand community recreation and tourism opportunities within Browning Passage. This also would integrate with the housing, providing an accessible waterfront public amenity. And furthermore, as part of this design, there would be green infrastructure considered to clean and mitigate stormwater runoff from this site as well as perhaps sites above. So a few key considerations. The next 2 slides outline those. The OCP amendment required for this would to change the land use designation from peninsula to future homes to enable this multi-unit housing development. This does advance council housing objectives. However, it's outside the village containment area, and so this would require a specific policy change to change our conservative growth targets from the OCP. This supports, this project would support compact growth using existing or redeveloped land that has existing servicing. There's strong alignment with our active transportation plan due to its access to transit as well as the multi-use path. Infrastructure capacity is a constraint, particularly around availability of water that would need to be resolved prior to occupancy. And then there could be some perceived sensitivity around scale and character from this development as it does exceed typical Campbell Street development. To summarize, there are challenges, but staff do believe that the application does address each and achieves some key benefits. Here, this slide essentially illustrates that tension displayed by a few notable elements. So it's currently not within the growth area, sits right outside of that. It does address an urgent housing need. There are known water and servicing constraints. However, it is efficient use of district-owned land. There's potential building character and environmental hazard considerations, but it does also provide a strong location for mobility and public amenity. To get to the efforts associated with community engagement, the referral process has already been initiated. We've reached out to both the nation, our regional district, School District 70, as well as the Ministry of Transportation. There would be a public hearing scheduled for this. We're looking at the regular meeting in August. And then public notices would go out according to community charter, our bylaws, as well as the Bush Government Act. So associated with this, because it is an OCP amendment, there are several recommendations. I'm not going to read them. They're before you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Fox. I'd like to say I think it's an excellent project and I fully support it. And from there, I will just go to Councilor Master.
It's a great project, will provide some much needed housing. And I think it's really good that we're providing park for the residents of Tofino, better water access.
Yeah, definitely a thumbs up. And I just, on the comment around the designation of the future homes and just literally being outside of that. And we draw, I will say, arbitrary lines for these types of land use designations. And, this is so close. I mean, so in terms of the fitting, I think it's an excellent fit. And as councillors have reiterated, this is an excellent project.
Aside from being an excellent project and meeting some of our goals in terms of housing and affordable housing, I think it's a good fit on the neighborhood imprint as well. It's buffered by a park land one side and some room to mitigate impacts on that side of the neighborhood. And it's situated on the other side among some fairly dense commercial units. So if any of the inlet properties were to be chosen for this designation, I think this is a good fit that way as well. So I'm in support of taking it to first reading.
Sure.
No comments beyond what's already been said. I agree with everyone.
I have a little comment. Just on, we often talk about, we make policies, we make bylaws, and they're to govern, and they're very, very carefully crafted, and they take into account many, many different opinions and different aspects from infrastructure to land use. And I want to say that we have some very difficult, complex problems. And sometimes that requires very creative thinking, seizing opportunities that may not come again. And I would just like to say that this proposal, this project, exemplifies all of that creative problem solving. Land was purchased with a Growing Communities Fund. It's being spearheaded by the Tofino Housing Corporation, finding potential funding from levels of government, as well as our own OAP income from emergency to short-term rental. So I just, and then the part thrown on access to our infrastructure. That we don't have to, if we follow this, then we do not have to necessarily dismantle our own property that we had to do to get access to it. So I just think this is a really wonderful example of how to break all the rules in a really great way. That's my final opinion. Seeing no objection, would somebody like to read the recommendations? And I think there's going to be, who's got the recommendations?
It's just one big one.
One big one?
Yeah.
And
I'll do it. I move that District of Tofino Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 1290.03/2026 be introduced and read a first time, and that council, in accordance with the Local Government Act, has considered the opportunities for consultation with persons, organizations, and authorities it considers will be affected by the proposed official community plan amendment bylaw, including the District of First Nation, Q&amp Regional District, School District number 70, the Ministry of Transportation and Transit, and considers the consultation undertaken to be appropriate at this stage. And that council has considered whether consultation should be early and ongoing, and will continue consultation opportunities through the referral process and public hearing. And that council directs staff to schedule a public hearing for the bylaw in accordance with the Local Government Act.
second by Councilor Master. Any further comments? All in favor? Unopposed, motion is carried. Can we just take a second? We're going to take a recess, couple-minute recess, and bring Councilor Swallow back. Back, let's reconvene. 10.3, waste and wastewater maintenance policy.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Staff are pleased to present the water and wastewater maintenance and inspection policy for consideration for council's consideration. Starting off with a little bit of background information. As part of asset management program, staff continually review existing policies for their impacts on levels of service.
This identified a policy gap related to water and wastewater. Following that, staff requested authorization at the January 27th committee whole meeting to develop policy. Staff then held a internal workshop with utility operators to go over historical practices, legislation requirements, just general valuable knowledge, let's say that. And then the draft policy was completed towards the end of May. I'd like to emphasize that while we didn't have a policy at the time, that didn't stop us from implementing asset management software. So this slide is just a representation of work orders that were completed throughout 2025 by the utility operations team. You will see a heavy focus on wastewater treatment processes. That's because we had this nice booklet of fresh O&M manuals that we could implement schedules into. So one of the key points on this that I wanted to put this slide in there is because as policy goes through and we start to build up more maintenance and inspection tasks for other water items and disciplines, we'll start to see that graph, the format shift a little bit. So a quick overview of the policy format. The policy outlines the purpose and the scope of assets that it covers. The policy section itself is split into sections, a general section, and then 4 sections based on the environmental operator certification program, or EOCP, the disciplines. So different avenues that utility operators focus on and learn about how those process equipment is working. So that's the way it's structured. Each one of the 4 sections in the EOCP is further broken down into maintenance tasks versus inspection items. Now that'll support as we progress into putting those kind of levels of service into our asset management. So the general section of the policy, this covers general safety items. It does set out a prioritization structure for the different disciplines, outlines operator certification requirements, general utility facility inspections. It also covers the emergency generators that cover a broad spectrum of infrastructure and some continuous monitoring. So sections 4.2 to 4.5 of the policy, these outline those 4 different disciplines based on the EOCP. I'm going to just present a couple of highlights from those 4 sections. So for water treatment, these include treatment plant equipment, deep cleans, and process equipment, water quality samples, valve exercising to make sure that valves are functioning properly. For the wastewater treatment side, this includes gas sensor calibrations, leak and corrosion inspections, because there's present H2S gases that can cool equipment faster than other facilities. And then general tank cleans, whether they be enclosed or open tank systems. For the water distribution, these include dam inspections, fire hydrant servicing, submarine pipeline inspections, same thing, valve maintenance. There's some crossover. And that section also outlines leak response timelines based on levels of water criticality that we're at that stage. Last but not least, wastewater collection. This section covers gravity main flushing to make sure the conveyance works, lift station cleaning maintenance, and some inflow and infiltration study requirements to ensure that our wastewater treatment plant is functioning at optimal design levels. I do want to just take a minute to note on the priority levels. While each discipline is prioritized based on risk and service delivery, the work orders themselves that are included in each different discipline have their own criticality. So you could have on the water distribution side, which in here indicates that it's a priority 4, you could have a high ranking item in a work order that the crews are actually going to receive to go and implement. And that will be done faster than a lower priority item in the water treatment. So when we looked at those items, we looked at things that provided life safety items, depending on which one they were in, things that were going to potentially impact service lives in terms of maintenance requirements that we're going to make sure that assets performed, among other things. So there is a lot of work in the back end to make sure that things aren't going to miss. I just wanted to point that one. So some next steps, if council should approve the policy, the final policy will be distributed to the utility operators and posted, and we'll talk on what that looks like. We'll also begin to just update and review what gaps we have in our standard operating procedures. If there's things that need to be updated or referenced that are critical, like there's some that are missing for some high priority items, we'll go and develop those internally. And all of these items and policy will help us support future asset management plans that be presented to council. With that, staff are available for any questions council may have, and I will leave the recommendation.
Excellent. Open it up to council for questions, clarity, comments. Here.
Just a quick comment to my day job, where we have binders and binders of maintenance and inspection, and then of course SOPs beyond belief. I really wanted to thank staff for, I know how much work goes into creating a document like this, and the importance and the prioritization that you have put forward, especially around our water distribution and our water treatment facilities. It's a wonderful document, and I think it'd be great for staff to have this and the continuity, because people come and people go. So the ability for that continuity to have it in writing is going to be critical. So I really appreciate it.
Councillor, like to offer to read this?
I can do that. Through the chair, I move that the District of Tofino Water and Wastewater Maintenance and Inspection Policy attaches Appendix 1 to the staff report titled Water and Wastewater Maintenance and Inspection Policy dated June 16th, 2026 be approved.
Second by Councillor Thomas. All in favor? None opposed. 10.4, we have zoning amendment. Bylaw, Woodsmere.
For this presentation, I will be giving you a brief overview of the zoning amendment bylaw number, I'm going to be presenting the permission to proceed for 825 Campbell Street, and that is for phase 2 of the Woodsmere development. Just as a refresher, the subject property that we're speaking to is highlighted in blue. So this is familiar from phase 1, as council did approve the adoption of zoning amendment bylaw 1315 back in 2025. So that would have resulted in the existing zoning, as you see in the graphic here. Bylaw 1315 was referred to as the Campbell Street neighborhood development. And so in the red parcels, those lots are now, well, the whole lot in its entirety is considered a split zone between A2 and that CSN zoning. The proposal is going to include the land that is situated in between those two areas. So a little bit of background: as the applicants received their zoning approval for those first 2 parcels, they submitted a subdivision application, and through that exercise and discussions with staff, it was determined that it would be more efficient in terms of roadway construction and some of the works that were required to accommodate the first 2 phases, that it would be more efficient to move forward with what would have been phase 2, or as a portion of what would have been phase 2 of the development. So this is going to include a parkland dedication as well as the road dedication through that subdivision application should council approve the second phase of zoning. Some highlights from the overview of the evaluation of the proposal. The new piece is going to include an apartment building complex that would add about 71 units of housing to the market. This would be protected under the rental tenure restrictions as well. And the applicant has expressed a willingness to enter into some affordability discussions, although those discussions are still early days. This would be utilizing this previously disturbed site. So there is still some environmental considerations, however, not to the extent that
properties with full trees that hasn't been previously logged may result in. And it is within the preferred growth area. So out of the hazard zones, map that hazard zones, as well as within the village containment area and future homes designation. There's a significant amount of work still to do for sort of moving ahead. Should council approve permission to proceed, we would be predominantly looking at the water limitations. The previous application did receive water allocation certificate. So the applicants would be looking at potentially incorporating some water conservation measures into those pre-approved developments in order to bring the water usage down, and also incorporating some water conservation into the new development as well. So there will be some further detailed assessment required for reporting to determine what the infrastructure capacity and demand. The community amenity conversation needs to happen as well. So as mentioned, we will be exploring affordability, an affordability component to this proposal or other to be determined. There was a traffic impact assessment that was completed for the first phase, and given the high volume of new units, we would want to see a new traffic impact assessment. With that road development that would be from the proposed access up to the north to Ellers Road, would loop that neighborhood and potentially create a little bit more of a dynamic when it comes to traffic ingress and egress. So we want to have that fully worked out, as well as the potential for safe crossings at either the Ellers location or south, where we're in negotiations for a transit stop. There is the new subdivision plan. There was a site plan that was incorporated into the initial development agreement. So any sort of change to that site plan would need to be formalized. That would then inform the subdivision as well. There, as noted, the existing development agreement would need to be modified to accommodate the road construction, what we're referring to as Road B, as well as the parkland configuration has changed slightly. And that was the result of just responding to more detailed site analysis and some of the topographical constraints that were on the lot. And so it's moved sort of more of along the line of the road as opposed to horizontal. And so it's maintained the size and scale, but it's just changed configuration. And then the proposal would meet the prohibition requirements through the LGA, the Local Government Act, for public hearings. So notice of public hearing waiver would need to be distributed prior to any advancement of the file. With that, the recommendation is to consider permission to proceed for further exploration of this application.
Super. I do have a couple questions. It's kind of technical. Subdivision. So why is what's the purpose of subdividing the property rather than just applying to build the proposed building on the within the existing zoning? Sure.
Thank you for the question. So there is the initial subdivision of the 24 fee simple lots. So those are all going to need to be subdivided in order to sell them. The complexities with some of our bylaws and policies around servicing, so limiting the number of service connections per lot, when you have a comprehensive development like this, it makes the most sense to subdivide the parcel, to isolate that parcel and make sure that the servicing is in alignment with a lot of our regulations. It also, it provides an avenue for road dedication as well as parkland dedication. So in a lot of those conversations and negotiations for these types of amenities, that is the mechanism in which we secure them. So there's a number of reasons. We generally don't prefer to see split zoning in the district. It does create some challenges around land use regulation, in the sense that if you have a lot specification that dictates lot lines or side yard setbacks, front rear setbacks, without those parcel lines, those boundaries are difficult to enforce.
And Because, in this, if this was to go through, it's within this particular subdivision that the district would finally would get that parkland dedication that was proposed in phase one.
That's correct. So this was initially proposed as a multi-phase development, and so a lot of the in the current development agreement, there was a commitment to dedicate a certain amount of parkland, and then the subsequent subdivision would resulted in an additional parkland piece. So what the applicant is doing is essentially bundling those two phases together, is wanting to proceed with a single subdivision application that includes the 2 lots for each apartment building with the fee simple. And so we would want to ensure that the road dedication and the parkland in a whole, as it's presented, would be dedicated at that time. What we would be looking to do as well is to go into an agreement, because essentially that parkland represents the 5% parkland dedication. And that 5% is of the lot in its entirety. So should the subsequent phases of development move ahead, we would not likely be securing any additional parkland dedication. That is the parkland piece in its entirety.
Okay, thanks for that. Mr. Steer.
Thank you through the chair, and you answered one of the Mayor Law's questions around the parkland dedication. Second, and there's, as you're saying, this is permission to proceed. There's a lot of information that's going to be coming forward, and around, specifically around the affordable housing conversation. And 1.5 questions. In terms of at what phase do we start having that? Would that be at first reading? Well, we'll get that information around those conversations. And if you could remind me on the initial 55 unit apartment complex, what and I can't remember if there was affordable housing that was incorporated into that. I do remember there's a lot of discussion around it, but I can't remember the final details of that.
Thank you for the question through the chair. So the initial discussion of the 55 unit, there was a condition applied to the zone in that it's restricted to rental. And so there was no affordability piece per se, but it did secure that housing as market rental. With the discussions with the applicant, there was resistance to commit to any affordability values because of the funding models that they were exploring. They have, often have affordability components built into that financing model. And so we very likely would have seen affordable units sort of come out in that development. But we weren't able to sort of secure those upfront just because of the early stages of that development and not knowing which funding model they were going to go forward with. So now that we're further down the design roadway, there's been a lot more work gone into, say, the pro forma, and so there's a bit more of an understanding of the costs and sort of the wiggle room per se that they would have in sort of assigning affordable units. And I just have to stress that it was a very just a high level sort of acknowledgement or willingness to enter into that. There was no commitment made. But there would be the rental tenure would be for the 71. So sorry, to continue on with the second part of your question, we would be having those conversations prior to coming forward with first reading, whether or not we were able to secure the affordability piece or not, and then council could comment.
Great, thank you. There will be some comments. Yes.
Councilor Anderson.
I have 2 questions. One was answered about the parkland, but that dedication would be for the whole parcel. The other question I had about the parkland, do we know much about the topography of the land and if we're getting usable parkland or if it's difficult to develop into recreational property? So maybe that will come out in further exploring and assessing it. Maybe we know something about that now. So yeah, we've had parkland dedications in the past that become quite difficult to do much with. Just due to the nature of the landscape. We've had bogs and we've had rocks and we've had ravines and all sorts of things donated to us in subdivision process that don't make very good recreational property. So I'm always looking at that as early on in proposals as we can. So that's a concern, and I don't know if you have the answer to that question right now. The other thing I was wondering about, I think some of the original iterations of this entire project, that the numbers of apartment units were more around 90, and now we're up into 130, 125 or so. And I'm wondering if maybe you don't have the answer to this, if that's part of the pro forma and the exploration of the feasibility of the entire project. Or if that's higher numbers might be driven by the request for affordable units. Yeah, and I'm just wondering if there's any comment on that increased density overall with just the apartment. So.
Thank you for the comment through the chair. So speak to the higher density question first. I'm not sure what the rationale was for changing that volume, but I would suspect that it was probably rooted in that pro forma. But I would have to defer to the applicants to provide some rationale for that. And I'd be happy to come back to council with that answer.
Okay.
To speak to your first question related to parkland, the condition of that parkland once received. So this will be an important topic of conversation as we move through the negotiations for that parkland. It would not be in the district's interest to secure parkland that is not graded, that is not potentially seeded or serviced. This would not be considered a piece of parkland that would serve as natural vegetation or like a conservation piece. This would be a usable parkland that we would want to ensure that is suited to recreation and wouldn't be a cost burden to the district that transfer occurs after the time in which the lands have been developed to the standard that we want them to be. And this was discussed early. I know that there was early conversations about that being graded. The timing of that transfer is likely to occur post-development, hence why there was that temporary park that was built into the agreement early, so that there was an area, green space, usable parkland in advance of that larger piece being completed. And so the applicants have expressed an intent to use that piece of land. There's going to be a lot of soil moving around, and so it will serve as a bit of a staging area. They're going to have to build it up, and that was part of the rationale for reconfiguring it, was to provide more of an opportunity to have a level and graded piece of parkland, whereas the other direction was quite a steep slope, so it may not have been suitable for recreation use.
Okay, glad to hear that. Thank you. Sure.
Councillor Master. Yeah, I'm happy to see it proceed. This has been a long time. I think we've identified some of the concerns I have, which is water and parking. We've recently approved a couple of developments where we've been offered 10 to 20% affordable units. I'll be brutally honest, I want to see the same in this. I think it's time this council got hard on pushing developers to offer a decent amount of affordable units. So you can convey that message for me.
If I may, that's in the funding model. There was there were higher percentages, so based on like sort of what type of residential agreement we'd like to see, there could be different stages of affordability built into that.
I've seen funding models change so often. I want to see.
I'll make sure it's noted.
I have a note, I noticed in the phase one, there was some other non-residential structures. Like store, potential for commercial aspect, something like that. And this, I just want to note that this is a significantly dense proposal. And we have, as noted with THC, when we look at, THC looks at smaller, high density developments, the topic of covered space or amenity space by all residents is quite a big deal. And I don't see any on this. And so I just thought maybe it'd be good time to just throw that by the applicant and say, look, it's a high priority. It's a significant dense proposal. And that would make their willing to consider it. It would make their proposal a lot more appealing to the residents that eventually live there and the communities. So, Councillor Steer.
Yeah, thank you through the chair, Mayor. You bring up a great point, and I think this is a high density area. We're creating quite a large new neighborhood, potentially a large new neighborhood in this area. And so making those neighborhoods very community focused and livable. And I think that's going to be something that I'm going to be really looking for in there, because we recognize the need for housing, but we also want the type of housing that is community friendly, for lack of a better description. So that'll be something I'll be definitely keeping my eye on. Which alludes to the amenities that Mayor Law was just speaking to.
I'll just make comments following up on those since you guys brought it up. Through the chair, even though I do understand the value of community spaces, given the rising cost of construction, and owning to Councillor McMaster's point of wanting to see more affordable housing contributions from the developer, rather than looking to add on development angles and costs, I'd be more interested in prioritizing affordable housing contributions coming out of this. If we're like, it's nice to have those things, but if it's an added cost and drives up the cost of construction and reduces those contributions, that's something I would be concerned about before we start asking for extras.
Councillor Sloman.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Councillor Anderson on that usable park space. That's what I'll be looking for. I think that's a priority when you're building a huge neighborhood like this, having someone for the recreate. I also really appreciated the water conservation discussion being brought up, and I think that'll be important to get these numbers to work.
Super. All right. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none. Somebody offered to read the recommendation. Councillor Anderson.
Sure. I'll move that staff be authorized to proceed with further review of the zoning amendment application for 825 Campbell Street.
Second by Councillor Thomas. All in favor? Opposed, motion carried. Right. Moving on to 10.5. Housekeeping. Presentation, I believe.
So moving on to the zoning amendment bylaw presentation number 1359. It's for subject property 1400 Pacific Rim Highway. Just a summary of the proposal. So this is the applicant seeks to rezone from what's existing as A3 to the RA4, or the large acreage residential. So this was a new zone that was created specifically for this property, but was intended to serve as sort of a general zone that potentially other properties would benefit from, that would align with the rural land use designation. So the total lot area is about 14 acres, but the parcel that we're speaking to is just the southern lot, which is across the highway, which amounts to about 3.26 acres. And for this development, we're not seeking any cash community amenity contributions given the scale of the development. The proposed uses will be for 2 dwelling units. That's in the form of single-family dwelling plus caretaker cottage and secondary suite. This keeps it the low density. There will be permissions for home occupations as well as accessory buildings, although short-term rentals and bed and breakfast uses have been explicitly excluded from the zone. In terms of development of the lot, this zone has incorporated a 30% lot coverage. We've also incorporated 30% vegetation retention, as well as the 30-meter vegetation buffer. There is a single access that was permitted in 2024 via the Ministry of Transportation and Transit access permit, and that will be the only access to the lot proposed. It is subject to development permit number 8, which is the wildlife habitat DPA. So they did go through the development permit process to secure that access and will be required to move through that process again at the time of subdivision if permitted to advance, as well as the time of construction. Some highlights are that the development in its rural form align with the OCP and land use designation of the area. The graphic there shows that there is riparian that encroaches onto the lot, but does not encumber the proposed parcel. There are borders there at the, as you can see, alongside the highway that represents the 30-meter vegetation retention buffer. There is a covenant in place that the district is named in. So that does minimize the buildable area of the lot, helping to preserve a large area of the subject property should development proceed. So due to staff oversight, we did not meet the statutory requirements for notification for first reading of the public hearing waiver. So notice was redistributed or distributed in accordance with the LGA. They have had the sign erected since the first and second reading, and it's still in place. We hand delivered and mailed to all residents and tenants within 60 meters, as well as posted in 2 editions of the Westerly newspaper. From that public engagement, we only received 1 comment, which was in support of the application. Bringing us to the recommendation today, which is to rescind the first and second reading and proceed with the rereading of first, second, and adding the third reading to progress the file. Look forward to any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for clarity? None. Councillor Sawyer.
I was just gonna say I'd be happy to read the presenter motion.
Okay, I think there's no questions for clarity and there's no comments. I see none. Go ahead.
All right, I move that first and second reading of District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1359, 2026, granted at the regular council meeting held on May 26, 2026, be rescinded.
Second by Councillor Thomas. Any further comments? All in favor? None opposed, motion is carried.
And I move that District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1359, 2026 be read a first, second, and third time.
Thomas, any further comments? All in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. Excellent. We have no bylaws. We have item 13, business initiated by council members. Committee, external appointment for reports, etc. Councillor Sloman.
Yeah, I'd like to give notice of motion, as I'm motion and prepared regarding the development of summer swimming and aquatics at Kennedy Lake Convention.
Any other external appointment verbal reports, committee reports? Seeing none. Okay. Question period, Ms. Larson.
But we don't currently have anyone signed up for question period. However, we do still have a member of the public in attendance via Zoom. So if you are in attendance and you would like to ask a question about anything from the meeting this evening, you can do so now by using the Q&A function. Your name, residential address, and the agenda item you're asking a question about. I will now open the call. Calling once. Calling twice. Calling 3 times. No questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Nugent. Well, then we will move into the closed, and I'll just move from the chair the meeting to close to public pursuant to section 91 AC and to B5 in the charges. personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employer, agent of the municipality or another position appointed by the municipality. 91C, labor relations or other employee. 2B, consideration of information received on how the conflicts relating to negotiations with the municipality and government, the federal government for both, opportunity for the government to the federal government for both, and a third party. Seconded by, I think it's over there, Councilor Sloman, or was it Councilor Emerson? Councilor Emerson. All in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. We're going to take at least 5 minutes here to